On Sunday, we saw some of the Mets' top prospects take center stage for the spring breakout game against the Nationals' top prospects. Which players stood out the most in the showcase? I'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Now, Sunday was the now annual tradition around Major League Baseball, the spring breakout game for the New York Mets. This is a new thing that was instituted, I believe it was last year, if I'm not mistaken, where they pit two teams and their top prospects for a showcase game, where you get to see all the guys ranging from players that'll be on the complex this year to guys that might be in AAA, all on one field for one exhibition game that gets a bunch of eyeballs on some of the top prospects in baseball. It's a showcase and a really fun one that allows you to really get some insight on the farm system. The broadcasts are always really good, just giving you some information on all these different players. And overall, it was, again, a really fun game to watch, to just see some of these guys, get a little bit more shine, because as much as it's now available to watch minor league baseball, it's still a tough watch at times, depending on what ballpark you're looking at the games in, the camera angles. So when you try to follow these players during season, sometimes it's tough. Spring breakout's a great way to get a real MLB style broadcast with all the top prospects on the field. So it's a lot of fun. If you missed it, make sure you try to find some highlights. You can go to MLB.com and see the condensed version of the game or the highlights. So you can still watch a lot of it if you go online right now. But let's talk about the Mets lineup for this game. They rolled out a starting lineup of Nick Morabito in center field, Carson Benge in right, Jett Williams at short, Ryan Clifford at first, Jacob Reimer at DH, Eli Serrano the second and left, Kevin Parada at catcher, Boston Baro at third, and Jeremy Rodriguez at second base. Now, what stood out from that lineup for me was the top four of Nick Morabito, Carson Benge, Jett Williams, and Ryan Clifford. Those are four of your top 11 prospects in the Mets farm system. If you refer to my ratings, I had Nick Morabito just on the outside looking in. Jett Williams is the top position player prospect in this system. I had Ryan Clifford and Carson Benge right behind him. So those were the guys that really jumped out that you got to see, at the top of the order for the Mets. And they each had some moments throughout this game. You look at the first inning, Nick Morabito popped out. Carson Benge drew a walk. Jett Williams hit a pop-up that was not caught by the infielder for the Nationals. And so they got a force out at second base on Benge. Jett Williams stood on first, took trade places with him, and actually stole a base there right away. So that was nice to see Jett Williams show off the legs a little bit. Ryan Clifford struck out to end that inning. The second inning, you saw Jacob Reimer, Eli Serrano, and Kevin Parada just get blown up. All of them went down swinging. Was it Alex? Yeah, Alex Clemmy struck out the side. The Nationals clearly showcased this kid, 6'6" lefty that I guess they got in the Lane Thomas trade. He looked pretty nasty. And he pitched 3 innings in this game, so they clearly were putting him front and center. I did feel like the Nationals were less inclined to showcase all their talent in this game. They weren't making as many subs as the Mets. The Mets were really trying to get a lot of guys in there. Just, I guess, a different way that the two teams tried to manage it. But again, Alex Clemmy was just dominant in that second inning. The Mets looked pretty hopeless. So then it was pretty crazy how everything turned around in the third inning as Boston Baro worked a 3-0 count. He got a fastball up in the zone and a really impressive home run for Boston Baro, who went to left center field as a left-handed batter, left on left. So to go backside and hit a home run like that, even on a 3-0 pitch, where he obviously had the green light and was swinging when he got a fastball, but that was a really impressive swing. I'd probably say it's the most impressive one in this game. A couple innings later, Ryan Clifford sent one to the moon that we'll talk about in a minute here. But Boston Baro is definitely an interesting prospect in this farm system. He was in my just missed episodes. I talked about 5 prospects that were just outside the top 10 guys that could certainly vault into that list this year. And I had him right behind Jeremy Rodriguez. I called it a coin flip between the two. And watching Boston Baro in this game, I might have been wrong on that coin flip. Boston Baro might be the better infield prospect. Jeremy Rodriguez is still a really exciting prospect who is going to give you great defense up the middle and a really good approach as far as his bat to ball skills. But Boston Baro, tell you what, some really good at bats in this game and a little bit of power showcase there. They talked about on the broadcast how he's trying to add on some muscle. And I'll tell you what, if he can really develop that power, all of a sudden it could be a completely different outlook for him moving forward, because last year, he hit 288 in low A, had a 368 on base, only a 399 slug, did not get into much power, stole 8 bases on 9 attempts, got up to high A and was, pretty much outmatched in 11 games. He'll go right back up there to high A to start the year. And I got to imagine he's probably the starting shortstop in Brooklyn. They have Jesus Baez, who I think will probably return there, but he's been playing more third base. I think they'll probably keep Baez at third. And I don't know who else would play shortstop on that team. I guess it depends on who else they might try to promote along, but I would think Jeremy Rodriguez is going to be the shortstop in St. Lucie. I don't know what they do with Colin Houck, if they move him along, even though he really struggled at that level and didn't look good in this game either. I'll talk about him a little bit later on, but Boston Baro was the MVP of this game. Honestly, he was outstanding to hit that home run. It was super impressive. After that, you had Jeremy Rodriguez grounded out. Nick Morabito got a base hit. Carson Benge, little hard hit ground ball that went down the third base line. So he ended up advancing to second base on, I guess, did the play go to third or not? I can't remember. I know that Morabito went first to third. And I think the throw might have trailed into third base and Bench got to second. But they did rule it a double. It's more of a base hit than a double to hit off the wall or anything, but still a good piece of hitting for Benge. But that threat was ended as Jett Williams and Ryan Clifford each struck out to end that inning. Fourth inning, Kevin Parada started a 2-out rally. Had a pretty good game. He had a base hit there and had a double later on. Parada got a fly ball to drop in. Boston Baro followed suit with a line drive. So 2 hits for Baro. Jeremy Rodriguez walked to load the bases for Morabito, who ended up flaring a base hit to drive in 2. Morabito then stole second base before Carson Benge struck out to end the inning. And then the 5th inning, Jett Williams drew a leadoff walk, and then Ryan Clifford absolutely destroyed a baseball, hit it dead center about 450 feet. It was a moonshot. So it was good to see Ryan Clifford get into the power a little bit. But overall, as you look through this starting lineup, I think for me, Morabito stood out, getting a couple hits, getting on base, showcasing his speed. Carson Benge, I thought his at-bats were pretty solid. I mean, it was pretty much just the walk, and it was the walk and the hit. But, getting on base a couple times is really good. Jett Williams, I mean, not anything spectacular, but we did see him steal a base. So that was pretty solid. Saw him draw a walk. Ryan Clifford, as I mentioned, getting into that power. And then Boston Baro from the bottom of the lineup really stood out with the home run and that second hit that he also hit pretty hard as well. Good defense over at third base. So I think Baro was really the shining star of the game to have that type of performance from the bottom of the lineup. Jeremy Rodriguez didn't really stand out, but didn't do anything that looked atrocious or anything. Same thing with Eli Serrano, Kevin Parada. Like I said, 2 hits, single and a double. And then I guess the guy that was most disappointing in the starting lineup was Jacob Reimer. He did not look great, struck out a couple times, looked overmatched. This is coming off of a really rough Arizona Fall League performance. So Reimer is definitely a guy who's seeing his stock plummet a little bit right now. He had a great season in 2023. A lot of optimism surrounding him heading into 2024. I think it was a hamstring injury, but lower leg injury for sure that kept him out for most of last year. And now in his first couple tastes of action again, coming off the injuries, he struggled in the Arizona Fall League, and he just looked pretty bad in this game. Doesn't mean that we're going to sell on him as a prospect entirely, but just something to note. I imagine he's right back in Brooklyn this year, and we'll see where they play him defensively. I don't know if he's going to play some first base with Jesus Baez starting at third. We'll see how that all shakes out for him, but definitely not the best showing for Reimer. We're going to talk about some of the pitching prospects in the next segment. The Mets scored 5 runs. They only allowed 1. I'll go through all the arms that threw in this game in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. They're looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious. We'll crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats that help you feel fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell varieties of the Wonderful Pistachios. They're the perfect grab-and-go snack. These are the honey roasted ones that I'm holding now. I love this flavor. I have a newfound love of the smoky barbecue. Those are delicious as well. And if you are more into cracking open every nut for that satisfying crunch, there are the in-shell varieties as well to give you a little bit of both options. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. Get snackin and crackin with this snack that packs the protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our next goal is to get to 13,000 subscribers by opening day. We're running out of time. Got less than 2 weeks left, and we're still over 400 subscribers away. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Let's talk about the pitching prospects in this game. Jonah Tong got the honor of being the starter for the New York Mets in this spring breakout. Last year, I believe we maybe saw Dom Hamill get that start, but Brandon Sproat and Noel McLean each pitched in the game. This year, the Mets decided not to throw those 2 guys. Tong was the one that gets that front and center opportunity as the starting pitcher in the spring breakout, and he earned it because last year he was outstanding. If it wasn't for Brandon Sproat, he would have won the pitcher of the year in the Mets farm system. Flew through, the system starting in St. Lucie, where he struck out 36 and 18 and 2/3 innings pitched. Was just too good for that level. They brought him up to high A, made 19 starts, pitched to a 3.71 ERA, and then he even got up to double A at the end of the season. Made 2 starts, held his own, struck out 14 and 9 1/3 innings pitched, 3 earned runs. So you're looking at a guy in Jonah Tong, which we've talked about a bunch on this show. Had him at number 7 in my top 10 prospects in the Mets farm system, just ahead of Noel McLean. I'll be honest, I am now not going to completely go back on those rankings, but I also have been paying attention to what Aram Layton, our prospect analyst at Just Baseball, has been doing in regards to the Mets farm system. And his top 15, he had Noel McLean at number 4. So that shows you how much he values McLean, a really good athlete that just spins the heck out of the ball. And so I guess with that, Arm can dream a little bit more about a more well-rounded arsenal. With Jonah Tong, he had him a little bit further down the list than I expected. I can't remember where he had him. I think he might have had him. Was it outside of the top 10? It might have been, which is crazy to me. I still think Jonah Tong is a really interesting prospect. And in this game, he looked solid enough. I mean, he goes 2 innings. He did fall behind hitters a little bit, was not pounding the strike zone as much as you would like. And I think one thing that I sort of noticed and was surprised of was, they were on him a little bit. I mean, he gave up, what was it, 1 hit? 1 hit and walked 2, but a couple hard hit balls mixed in there. I think what can happen here for Jonah Tong is they can key on that fastball a little bit. And as you face the better competition throughout his career, last year pitching in low A and high A, you can really get away with just a really good, high, rising fastball, that ride that he gets with the induced vertical break that he has on that pitch, which again, for those of you who missed that top 10 prospects episode, if you're looking at the IVB of a pitcher and it's over 17 inches of induced vertical break, that's really good. Again, that's that perceived ride on the pitch. That's how the fastballs are sort of ignoring gravity and they're staying up in the zone. For Jonah Tong, it was over 20 inches last year. So that's an elite fastball, but he doesn't throw with elite velocity. I think he did touch 97 in this game, which is a good sign, but more sits 92, 93 typically. And then he pairs that with a 12-6 curveball. So he throws over the top, and those two pitches work really well off of each other. But if he's not able to throw that curveball for a strike, all of a sudden, you only have one pitch that can live in the zone. So if I am a batter, I can eliminate a lot of stuff where I'm just keying on, if it's over the plate, it's a fastball, and I'm going to try to tee off on it and crush it. So that's the one thing that Aram has been sort of cautioning me about Jonah Tong. I still think the Mets are going to be able to round out his arsenal and give him a couple other pitches that he can work with, whether that is incorporating a sinker, maybe giving him, a gyro slider that might be a little bit of an easier breaking ball for him to throw than a traditional sweeper or a slider. We'll see exactly how he continues to evolve as a prospect, but he definitely has to add some pitches to his arsenal. And I would not be surprised if in Double-A this year, he does run into a little bit of troubles as he is facing better competition. But I think the strikeouts are still going to come, and I'll still bet on a great fastball above all else. And that's why I had Jonah Tong ahead of Nolan McLean in my top 10 prospect rankings. And I think those guys are still probably a little bit closer than Aram is giving them credit for. But again, Aram knows this stuff better than me. So I will defer to his judgment a little bit. I do encourage you to check out, if you look up Mets top 15 prospects on YouTube, you can find the Call Up podcast where he does like an hour and a half where he just went through his whole top 15 Mets prospects. So that's a really good listen or a watch if you're trying to get to know a little bit more about some of the top prospects in the Mets system. So after 2 scoreless innings from Jonah Tong, Jonathan Pintaro came on. 27-year-old. I'm just reading about him and learning about him tonight. I'll be honest with you. Kind of an under-the-radar guy. The Mets signed him out of indie ball last year, and he flew through the system. Started in Brooklyn, 2.50 ERA in 36 innings, went to Double-A, had 3.18 ERA in 7 starts. Then he even made it up to Syracuse for 1 start and did not allow a run in 4 innings. Sounds like the Mets' plan for him is to sort of fall in line with your Jose Budo, Max Kranix of the world, where you have these guys that do have a more well-rounded arsenal, particularly with Budo. I think if the Budo comparison is probably a little bit better than Max Kranix, because Kranix has started to turn into kind of a 2-pitch, 3-pitch pitcher where it's just that insane fastball and got a couple breakers that he goes off of it. But I think with Jonathan Pintaro, you're looking at guys that might be able to elevate a little bit more out of the bullpen, and guys that had good strikeout numbers, as starting pitchers, particularly Kranich and Pintaro, that you hope that can then translate in the bullpen, and maybe you can get multi-inning relievers out of him. He's an interesting guy because he's 27 years old, and they threw him out second in a spring breakout, so they clearly like him a lot. Right-handed pitcher. He sort of throws closed off, kind of across his body a little bit. Allowed 3 hits, but did not walk any, pounded the zone. Did not give up any runs, struck out 1. Not a bad showing for Pintaro. I will be interested to see what he looks like in Syracuse this year. He's a guy that could actually make it to the big leagues this year. I mean, he's so advanced when it comes to his age. I think the big thing from last year was the walks at times got a little bit high. But if he can, pound the strike zone, he's got a bunch of pitches he can throw. He might be able to be a really surprising guy that finds his way in the big leagues this year. So it's definitely interesting to see the Mets throw him second in this spring breakout. The third arm out was Jonathan Santucci. This is going to be a name to watch this year. Second round pick this past season out of Duke. He is a guy that I think had like top 10 buzz in the draft, but had an injury that isn't affecting him anymore, but an injury during his season in college that sort of hurt his draft stock a little bit. He also was a two-way guy too. So he hit and pitched in college, but now he is just going to be a pitcher. And first outing that we see of him, pretty solid. Gave up an infield hit where he tried to make a glove toss that didn't pan out well. That put a runner on second base, and then he walked a batter. So he was sitting runners on first and second, nobody out, but he got a double play ball and a pop-up, and just like that, he was out of the jam. This is a big left-hander that has really good stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Mets place him. If they go right to high A with him, I wouldn't be surprised. Or if they start him in low A and see how he progresses. But Jonathan Santucci is a guy that could really fly up prospect rankings this year. He could be, fringe top 15 by the end of the season if he has a good year. Obviously, as a second-round pick, the Mets really liked what they saw, and he could be a big part of their future. Dylan Ross was the next arm up. 13th round pick in 2022 that had Tommy John and has basically just been lost. Hasn't really thrown for the Mets since he got drafted. Had one inning pitched in St. Lucie this past year, and then they were trying to get him some work. So they threw him out there in the Arizona Fall League, and he got absolutely demolished. 11 runs and 5 2/3 innings pitched. Pitched a scoreless inning in this one, allowed one hit, picked up a strikeout. Not too much I can give you as far as takeaways on Dylan Ross, but it will be interesting to see what he looks like, if he has a fully healthy season here. Last guy to spend some time on is Ryan Lambert. If you go all the way back to my draft coverage, Ryan Lambert is one of the picks I was most excited about because of what he did in the MLB Draft League, which is sort of this showcase league they have now that it goes after the college season, before the draft, where guys get to go out and show what they have and try to improve their draft stock. And I think he definitely did that in the MLB Draft League, a 1.50 ERA. He struck out 10 in 6 innings pitched, did not walk a batter. So that is really impressive stuff. And this guy throws absolute shed. Touched 101 in this game. I think he's touched 102 in the past. He said when the adrenaline gets pumping, you never know how hard he's going to throw. That fastball has the makings of a high leverage reliever. What do you pair with it? How do you stay healthy? These are all things that are left to be answered. I know a lot of Mets fans were so excited about Bryce Montes de Aca, but I think he just got hurt again. I think he might be going for like another Tommy John. So, with these high octane arms, you just really never know. Not to put that on Ryan Lambert, certainly. We'll knock on wood for sure. We'll cross our fingers. But my point more is, you can look at him right now and you could say, man, 101 miles per hour, he's going to be in the Mets bullpen this year. But a lot has to happen before that. You can't just throw 101 and make it in the big leagues. A good fastball alone is not going to do it. You have to have some other pitch that you can go to that can pair with that fastball, or the fastball's got to have some crazy movement to it. He really struggled to locate his breaking ball in this game, and that's going to be the differentiating factor for him. If he can hone in on that slider and get it to a point where he has a real strikeout pitch off of the fastball, where he can just get ahead of guys and then throw that slider and put them away, he could fly through the system this year. But there's still some development that has to take place. It's not just going to happen with a snap of the fingers and overnight he's going to be in the big leagues. He has the fastball that gets you really, really excited, and he blew some hitters away in this game. Couple strikeouts in his inning, but he also struggled with his command. So we're going to have to see how that manifests itself throughout this season. But I'm excited to see what the Mets do with him. Where do they start him? Last year, he threw 3 innings in Brooklyn. I'd imagine that might be the first place they put him. But you also, with the college arm that throws that hard, you might just throw him into the deep end of Double-A and sees what happens. Maybe it's a matter of which pitching coach they want him to work with. I mean, that could be part of the decision as well. But Ryan Lambert is definitely a name that I'm going to be watching very closely this year, because not many guys can throw 101 miles an hour. And if he figures it out, this guy can absolutely be an impact arm for the Mets in pretty short order. He just has to get that command in line, and particularly with that breaking ball, have another pitch that he can go to. But he is as exciting as any relief prospect the Mets have. And that's something I'm going to try to do here before the start of the season. I am planning on doing a show where I just break down exciting relief options, in the farm system. Trey McLaughlin, we've seen a lot in camp so far for the Mets. I'm getting into some MLB games. So I'll go through a couple of different arms to have a chance to potentially impact a bullpen this year or maybe next year. So stay tuned for that. Final segment today. I am going to talk a little bit about Tyler McGill, but we're also going to go through some under the radar prospects that made this spring breakout roster, guys that didn't really do too much in this game, but could do a lot this season. So I'll talk about them in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control of your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money, you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, LOCKEDONMLB, or code LOCKEDONMLB, for half off your first year. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets Insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets Insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's talk about some of the under-the-radar prospects that made the spring breakout roster. Simon Juan was on there. He signed for big money a couple years ago, had a good second tour of duty in the complex league this past year after a little bit of struggles in 2023. Across 50 games played, he hit 7 home runs, had 11 doubles. He even homered this year in spring training in a big league game. So Simon Juan is an outfield prospect with big power, a name to watch this year, likely in Port St. Lucie. A.J. Ewing played some center field in this game, which was noteworthy as he was an infielder last year. So will be interesting to see if that is his position moving forward. This is the guy the Mets got with their comp pick for Jacob deGrom, signing with the Rangers. He dominated the complex last year, hit 5 home runs in 19 games, got on base at a 422 clip, had a 993 OPS. That necessitated promotion to low A St. Lucie, where in 71 games, he struggled a little bit, had a 689 OPS. I'm sure he'll repeat St. Lucie this year, but definitely a name to watch in this farm system. Bohan Adderley was a Dominican Summer League All-Star this past season, got on base at a 356 clip, didn't hit for much average or much power, but he is a absolute burner, stole 27 bases on 28 attempts. He turned 18 years old in November. Imagine the fact that he's here would suggest that he's probably going to spend the year in Port St. Lucie, playing in the Florida Complex League. Middle infielder from the Bahamas. Will be very interesting to see what his first season of stateside baseball looks like, assuming he does play on the complex. Christopher Suero and Diverson Gutierrez, I talked about recently, so I'm not going to dive into them too much. You can go back on the YouTube channel and find a segment that I clipped up. So if you look up top catching prospects in the Mets farm system, I broke down the top 5. So Christopher Suero, Diverson Gutierrez, Kevin Parada, Giovanni Rodriguez, and Ronald Hernandez is the 5th one. So yeah, if you want to check that out, I talk about those guys at length, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them today. Edward Lantigua also made this roster, an 18-year-old outfielder, got on base at a 397 clip in the DSL. Guy that is a great athlete. I mean, you're thinking 5-tool potential if it all pans out, but he's obviously super far away He's 18. I have not seen too much of him, but the people in the Mets who are running the Mets farm system are very high on Edward Lantigua. Last guy to talk about here that made the spring breakout roster is Trey Snyder, drafted in the 5th round this past year, over slot. He got late second-round pick money, a toolsy shortstop, likely to be the starting shortstop at the Florida Complex League for the New York Mets, and we'll see how he does. But he is a very interesting teenager to follow this season. So that's about it from the spring breakout game. Always fun to see these prospects take center stage. And the Mets are definitely, cultivating an up-and-coming farm system. I think when you look at the top of that lineup, when you saw Nick Morabito and Carson Benge and Jett Williams and Ryan Clifford, those are all guys that you can be really excited about becoming real pieces for the Mets. I mean, for Morabito, he's at worst going to be a 4th outfielder, and I think a pretty high probability big leaguer at that. At best, he's your center fielder of the future. Carson Benge also could be your center fielder of the future. If not, he is going to play out well in right field. Granted, you have Juan Soto, but with prospects, you let them develop and you see what you do with them. You never know. These guys could be the pieces that get you the ace at the deadline. You really don't exactly know how prospect capital will end up manifesting itself on the big league roster, but you just want as many good players as you can develop because that gives you the equity to do a lot of things. Beyond that, of course, Jett Williams and Ryan Clifford, we talk about a bunch. Then you have, again, Boston Baro with a standout performance. You see Jeremy Rodriguez play a little middle infield. Fun to see him. And so just overall, there was a lot to like in this game on the pitching side. Jonah Tong, Ryan Lambert, to see Jonathan Pintaro as a guy that just put his name on the map because here's the guy that I hadn't even heard much about. I will give Mets Brians a shout out. You can check out their whole list of the top prospects in the Mets farm system. Mike Mayer does a great job over there. He had Pintaro at number 22, so definitely was very high on him, and it was a good place for me to read up a little bit about Pintaro, so you can check that out as well if you are looking for more prospect content. Now, to close out the show today, I briefly wanted to address Tyler McGill's start this Sunday against the Astros. He did get 4 runs on 6 hits, so you look at that and you think, ooh, rough outing, but he threw 5 innings, got the pitch count up, struck out 6, did not walk any. Carlos Mendoza really raved about his stuff after the start. And Mike Puma reported today that the Mets are very much considering keeping Tyler McGill in the starting rotation and putting Paul Blackburn in the bullpen. So if that ends up panning out, I think your rotation is going to have Canning and McGill, and Blackburn is going to pitch out of the pen, and that could be something that they stick with. Maybe they think that Paul Blackburn is best served to be a multi-inning reliever. Maybe they're looking at Paul Blackburn, and he is very much in that Adrian Hauser boat from last year, where you will use him and keep the depth as long as you can. But once the roster requires better arms in that bullpen, you eventually part ways because Blackburn has not looked great so far in spring. So maybe that's where the Mets are at with him. They might be a little bit higher on what Canning can do as a guy that threw 170 plus innings last year and someone they clearly like to sign in this offseason, as well as Tyler McGill, who, as I've talked about on this show recently, even I think just flatly has better stuff than either of the other back end options with Canning and Blackburn. But we will see how the Mets ultimately line it up. We got about a week left here of spring training games, and 10 days away from opening day. So exciting stuff ahead. This week, I'm going to really dive into some NL East preview. So I'm going to rank the Mets against the Phillies and the Braves for their infield, for their outfield, for their catching situation, DH, rotation, bullpen. And we're going to end up compiling a composite score, which I've done in the past, to ultimately rank the best teams in the National League East. So we'll have a lot of those shows coming. Also, I want to do another Juan Soto show this week. I think I'm going to do that one tomorrow because I want to talk about Juan Soto and his MVP case for this year. Can he win the award? But also, what does the next decade look like with Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani as potentially the 2 most prominent players in the National League? So that's going to be a fun show. Make sure you check that out. If you're listening today on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. After your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. On Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.